Welcome to the studio. Today we're going to be looking at microphones. So recently Angus, Maker's Muse, asked on Twitter like, hey, what is a recommendation for a good cardioid pencil condenser microphone that you can use in an overhead setup? And I was like, hold on, don't discard shotgun microphones before you've tried one, because the common understanding is that shotgun microphones aren't great for an enclosed space like a small room like this studio is. However, I'm using one quite happily, and I've compared it against a whole bunch of other microphones, and I found that this is actually a solution that is convenient because I don't need to wire myself up with a lav or stick it to my chest. I can just leave it overhead and it sounds good. It sounds really good. So today we will be comparing a couple microphones. We'll see what they sound like. I'll give you guys an off-axis test so you can hear what the room tone and the reverberation sounds like with these mics, because that is the biggest thing that differentiates a shotgun microphone from a simpler cardioid microphone. The cardioid has a cleaner pickup, but a less focused one. So it will be picking up more of the reverb from the room. However, that reverb will not sound weird, muffled, EQ'd in an odd way. So we will be comparing 2-3 different types of microphones. First of all, the one that you're hearing right now, the Sennheiser MKE Essential. This is a shotgun microphone. As you can see, it has an interference tube about the length of 12-15 centimeters. This is the baby brother of the MKH 416. Which is basically the industry standard. MKBHD uses it, LTT uses them. It's the shotgun microphone that you use, whenever you need an overhead boomed up shot with the microphone from overhead with a shotgun mic. So this one is 260, 70 euros, roughly somewhere in that ballpark. It is significantly cheaper than the MKH 416, but it doesn't sound that worse or that different. So this is what I've been recording most of my YouTube videos on recently, and I like this microphone. You're going to be able to compare it to all the others that we're going to try. So on the other end of the spectrum, no, this is not the cheapest one. There is actually one cheaper, the Rode VideoMicro. This is a 50 euro microphone that has like a little Rycote mount. It plugs straight into your camera. Cardioid pickup pattern. Like I said, 50 bucks. This is the one that I use when I do like run and gun shoots. I just throw this on the camera. I try to get as close to the camera as possible so that this thing has an easier time of picking me up. Usually I will use Acon's De-Reverberate with it, which is a plugin that you can use in a video editor or an audio workstation to take out some of the room tone. I always use that on my regular mic as well, but dialed down quite a lot so it doesn't introduce like that artifacty processed sound, but just takes out a bit of the reverb that is just always present. So 50 euro microphone, we'll be comparing this as well. And then two that might not sound like they, or might not look like they would be an option as an overhead microphone, but like at the end of the day, they're just, a microphone's a microphone. These are just ones that have a handle attached to them. And in fact, if we take off the cage, I believe it's called, from the SM58, the Shure SM58, you could argue this is like a pencil mic, maybe a bit overweight, but you could use this if you don't want the large shock cage, whatever this is called on it. But yeah, Shure SM58. This is basically, if you think microphone, this is the microphone you think of. It is a cardioid pickup pattern, so it is a directional microphone, but it has like the most natural and widest, but also most forgiving pickup pattern. So you can talk into it slightly off. There's a fly in here. You can talk into it slightly off axis and it's still going to pick up fairly well, but that also means it's not going to be rejecting room tone and like sounds from the side all that well. So Shure SM58, about 100 bucks. This is what I use for interviews and shows and stuff when those were still a thing I'd go to. Microphone I do love, but it's not seen too much use recently, of course. But yeah, obviously one that you kind of have to include. And if you want to, you can use that as a cardioid overhead microphone. Also, I think everyone knows how these sounds like. This is like the #1 stage mic. Then actually the cheapest microphone in the bunch looks like, well, I guess these stage mics all look kind of the same. A Superlux PRA D1. This is 25 euros. And for 25 bucks, this thing is amazing. So this is not cardioid, this is a super cardioid microphone. So it's got a slightly narrower pickup pattern. It rejects more sound that's coming off from the side. But because of that pickup pattern, I believe, or it might just be because of the way that the capsule is mounted, it does pick up a lot of the noise from the grip, from handling it. So whenever you move your hands on it, that is very, very loud and it's extremely distracting. So I stopped using this for like show floor use. This is best used in a mic stand or mounted somewhere. So hey Angus, if you're watching this and you're looking for something that has a pickup pattern that is somewhat tight and you know, you just want to mount it and not touch it, then this might be an option. It's 25 bucks. Like you can at least give it a try. So yeah, super cardioid, 25 bucks. We'll be mounting this up here as well, just to give it a fair comparison. So that's the two stage mics, the on-camera mic and the shotgun mic. Next up, we're gonna be comparing two lavalier mics. Lavalier mics. So these typically mount to your I don't do English. Your collar, basically. And they're supposed to be mounted at chest height. This is at chest height. Often I clip it to my t-shirt collar up here. I mean, if I'm wearing like Hawaii shirts, of course, you can mount it lower down, but this is too high. This picks up too much of that throat warbly noise. So yeah, these get mounted somewhere down here. You can mount them visible, either on the outside of yourself, on your shirt, or you can stick them to your chest with like a Rycoat undercover. I've got a set of those here. I've not used them, but whenever you see Linus jumping around in the studio, just you know, you don't see a mic in shot, you don't see a mic clipped to him, but he's moving around and he's getting picked up perfectly. That's what they use. So that's when they've actually stuck a microphone to him, and that just picks up whatever he's saying through the shirt. So two of those. The first one, the one that I'm using right now, is the I'm typically using when I'm using a lavalier microphone, the Sennheiser MKE Essential. This is a 200 euro microphone, comes with whatever plug you want, I guess. Relatively compact capsule, but it is larger than the other one that we're going to be testing, the Rode Lav. They've got so many of these. This is the one that comes with the Rode Filmmaker kit, which has the two transmitters included in it. Well, these actually. One transmitter, one receiver. I'm using a separate Rodelink compatible transmitter for the MKE 600 right now. But yeah, these Rode mics, I believe they make like at least half a dozen different varieties of the same microphone. The Smart Lav, the Lav, the Filmmaker Lav, the whatever. This guy actually I think has the same capsule in it. So the Smart Lav Plus, I believe the lowest end one that you actually want to be using, that plugs straight into your phone if you have a phone with a headphone jack. Comes in around 40 bucks. And then like the highest end ones I think are over 200. I think the one that is actually labeled as the Filmmaker Lav, the one that goes with the Filmmaker transmission kit, is around 100 something bucks. So obviously cheaper than the MKE Essential, but I've had a problem with these. These have a very thin cable, Kevlar reinforced apparently, but it kept breaking at the plug. I have two of these mics. They both failed at the same spot, so I put a new Reen plug on this guy, and it works again, but yeah, I was looking for something new, so right now my go-to lavalier microphone is the Sennheiser MKE Essential. Alrighty then. Oh yeah, one last one that I'm going to throw in, the Rode HS2 headset microphone. So this is like your typical telemarketer microphone. This sits over your ears like this, like that, and ideally you don't see anything of the frame itself. You just see like the microphone going up top here. There's a little windshield on here which you can take off, and it's just a super compact little capsule that's sticking out towards your face, and it sits fairly close to your mouth. It is an omnidirectional microphone, as are these two lavaliers, so they pick up sound from every direction, so you don't have to point them at yourself. You can point them whichever way you want. This also omnidirectional, which of course picks up more noise from away from your mouth, from any other direction, but because it is so close to your mouth, this should give you the best pickup out of any like the omnidirectional microphones or compared to a lavalier microphone. This should pick you up very clearly, even if you are in a somewhat noisy environment. All right, so just to give you an overview of sort of what the environment is that we are testing in here, let me give you a quick rundown. So there is you guys. That's the ceiling there. That's the mic that I'm talking into right now. As you can see, like this is a concrete room. This is all concrete walls. That's concrete. That's concrete. There is a carpet on the 3D printer bits. There's a carpet on the floor. There are some rock wool acoustic panels on the ceiling, and yeah, mostly it is just like shelves and that's ugly. Shelves and a little bit of stuff that is breaking up the sound, so it's not really absorbing much. That's absorbing, and yeah, behind the microphone here, there are some basotec bits, but yeah, there is not a whole lot that would absorb sound in here. This is, as far as like livelihood of the room, as far as how much reverb this is giving me, I would say this is roughly, well, it's a relatively small room. This is, I think, 4.5 by 5 meters, somewhere in that neighborhood. But it is a bit more lively than your typical living room. So a bit more reverb than you'd have in like a standard living room. So with that out of the way, we're going to get to testing. So first off, I'm going to read you the start of my latest video right up here in the ideal pickup position, about 30-35 centimeters away from my face, pointed at my chin. I believe that's how you're supposed to use these. And then I'm going to move off axis to the side and read that same paragraph. And depending on how that sounds from the side, you'll be able to get an impression of what the room tone, the reverb is going to sound like. So with something like a shotgun mic, the idea is that anything that is off axis actually has a color to it. So there's like a different frequency response. If the microphone is picking up reverb from the back, yes, it's going to be attenuated, but it's going to sound odd. Any reverb it picks up is going to sound weird in a way. Whereas something like a cardioid pattern has a very natural sound profile even from the side. So this should, I mean, the thing with these is the shotgun microphone is very focused, so it's not going to pick up much of the off-axis sound from the start. But whatever it is picking up will sound somewhat odd. Whereas a cardioid microphone will pick up more of your room tone, but it will not sound weird. So that's going to be a trade-off. But like I said, I'm going to be performing that same paragraph off-axis, and then you guys can make up your own mind on what sounds more natural. The off-axis test is just for reference of how the rejected sounds like. What you should really be paying attention to is what this setup sounds like right here, where I'm standing center of frame in the perfect position. So you can kind of get your head around what the sound profile sounds like of each microphone. So let me start out with the first one, with the MKE 600. Going straight into the camera, I will be leveling off the volume between each microphone because obviously they do have different sensitivities. So the same volume of my voice will result in a different volume in camera. I will be leveling that off to the same level, but just keep that in mind. Not all of these are suitable for the same recording devices. All right, starting with the Sennheiser MKE 600. Okay, you all know how 3D printing works. You start out by creating a 3D model, export that as an STL or 3MF, then import that into a slicer, which then creates the G-code that the printer understands. And off to the side. Okay, you all know how 3D printing works. You start out by creating a 3D model, export that as an STL or 3MF, then import that into a slicer, which then creates the G-code that the printer understands. So next up, the Shure SM58. I seem to have misplaced the microphone mount for this one, so I am using a bit of gaff tape, but it's in the same position and there's not going to be any mounting noise anyways. So, Shure SM58. Okay, you all know how 3D printing works. You start out by creating a 3D model, export that as an STL or 3MF, then import that into a slicer, which then creates the G-code that the printer understands. And let's move off axis. Okay, you all know how 3D printing works. You start off by creating a 3D model, export that as an STL or a 3MF, then import that into a slicer, which then creates the G-code that the printer understands. Alright, next up the Superlux PRA D1. Keep in mind this is a super cardioid, so the off-axis stuff is going to sound different, interesting, we'll see. Okay, you all know how 3D printing works. You start off by creating a 3D model, export that as an STL or a 3MF, then import that into a slicer, which then creates the G-code that the printer understands. And off-axis. Okay, you all know how 3D printing works. You start out by creating a 3D model, export that as an STL or a 3MF, then import that into a slicer, which then creates the G-code that the printer understands. Next up, the Rode. Wow, you are loud. Ho, whoa, 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 wee wah. I think I need to calm you down a bit. Oh, you're on +10. I'm going to put you on. Okay, turn down the gain on the receiver a bit, but we'll see if this is enough. It looks good. Okay. Rode VideoMicro. I have used this as a makeshift boom mic once, I think, when interviewing Prusa at some point. I hit this in a ceiling lamp, and it worked all right. It worked all right for what it is. Also, I did have to switch to the different transmitter style. I am not using the News Shooter Kit XLR transmitter anymore because this is purely a 3.5mm headphone jack style microphone. So I'm using the same belt clip transmitter that you'd use for the lavalier microphones. Okay, you all know how 3D printing works. You start out by creating a 3D model, export that as an STL or a 3MF, then import that into a slicer, which then creates the G-code that the printer understands. Okay, you all know how 3D printing works. You start out by creating a 3D model, export that as an STL or a 3MF, then import that into a slicer, which then creates the G-code that the printer understands. Okay, sorry about the autofocus, but like there's nothing to see anyways. All right, moving on to the lavalier microphones. You're currently hearing the Sennheiser MKE Essential lavalier microphone. Like I said, this is a €200 option, and of course we will not be doing the off-axis test because I can just move over here and it's going to sound exactly the same because the microphone is moving with me. So let's do the read. Okay, you all know how 3D printing works. You start out by creating a 3D model, export that as an STL or a 3MF, then import that into a slicer, which then creates the G-code that the printer understands. All right, next up the Rode lavalier or the Rode Filmmaker Lav. They're all pretty much the same. You probably are hearing quite a dramatic difference in sound profile. That is just what most Rode mics sound like. They sound a bit more muffled. You could say they sound more neutral. I really prefer the sound of these Sennheisers, but hey, it always depends on what your voice sounds like. Some microphones just work better or treat some voices better than others. I just really like the clear, crisp sound profile that Sennheiser is giving, though, like, I know this is not accurate, but hey, I'm putting EQ in this stuff anyways. By the way, all these clips, this entire video has been completely unprocessed except for volume leveling. Usually I do a lot more stuff to my videos. I do, of course, a compressor, I have an EQ on here, I have de-reverberate set on a very low level on just every clip that I do. But this is completely unprocessed. And of course, on top of what you're hearing right now, you can process this stuff however you want. Okay, let's do the read for the Rode Filmmaker Lav. Okay, you all know how 3D printing works. You start out by creating a 3D model, export that as an STL or a 3MF, then import that into a slicer, which then creates the G-code that the printer understands. All right, so lastly, the Rode HS2. This is all, like, this is, I don't know, it's supposed to be like stealthy and invisible and whatever, but having this thing in your face can be kind of distracting, and of course it is the telemarketer look. Now, one thing that I can't really demonstrate in this video is that because this microphone is so close to my face, instead of being down here on my collarbone, it is going to be picking up my voice much more loudly than the other microphones that live down here. So if you are in a noisy environment or even in a reverberant environment like this one should have the cleanest recording out of all these lavalier microphones because just physically your voice is so much louder than everything else around it. All right, let's do the read, and then I think we're pretty much done here. Okay, you all know how 3D printing works. You start by creating a 3D model, export that as an STL or a 3MF, then import that into a slicer, which then creates the G-code that the printer understands. Or sometimes doesn't understand. Yeah, that happens. All right, so I'm not going to watch this video. I've done these experiments before. This is just as reference for you guys. You can make up your own mind which of these microphones sounded the best sound profile wise, but keep in mind sound profile as far as how clear or crisp something sounds, you can take that out with an EQ to an extent. So I was quite happy using the Rode lavalier with an EQ for a while because I was pushing it to sound more like a Sennheiser. So what you should just really keep an ear out for in this video is how much reverb you're hearing, how clean the recording sounds or how echoey it sounds. So at the end of this video right now, I'm going to give you all the little first sentence bits of each microphone in a row just so you get a back-to-back comparison of those again. All right, thanks for watching. Angus, if you're watching, I hope this was helpful to you and got you a bit of an understanding of what these microphones actually sound like. Again, if you're looking for a pencil mic that has a cardioid or a supercardioid, whatever pickup pattern, this should be your reference because essentially it's the same type of microphone, just in a different format. This should perform, except for like sound profile, EQ basically, this should perform pretty much the same as any other cardioid microphone. All right, have a good one. Bye. Okay, you all know how 3D printing works. 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 Keep it, what do I say here? I don't say keep on making. This is my main channel. Like, what do I do? I'm lost.